What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Assemble Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Jones. Whether I'm hitting the trails, training for an ultramarathon, or pushing my limits in the gym strength training, I've always been fascinated by what drives us to perform at our best. This podcast is for everyone, from the serious endurance, strength, or hybrid athlete to the outdoor enthusiast who wants to live life to the fullest. I believe that peak performance is an assembly of physical training, mental fortitude, emotional health, and social support. Whether you're training for a sport or viewing life itself as the ultimate athletic event, join me in redefining limits and living a life full of challenges and adventure. Let's get into today's podcast. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. We were off last week for a lot of life stuff, but we're back today with Chris Liddle. He is a personal trainer based in Canada. He's been in the industry for a while now. He's got a lot of connections, been around a lot, has a lot of awesome experience. So I'm excited to talk to him. So Chris, how's it going?
It's going great, Justin. I want to thank you first and foremost for having me on the show. It's exciting to see like the people that you're getting on the show, the conversations that you're having, and just like your drive to be better. I think a lot of people can take inspiration from that. But yeah, like it's going to be exciting to see what we talk about today. And I hope that people take an opportunity to kind of dive into this episode and past episodes of yours.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I thought we'd start off with you giving a little bit more history of like kind of how you got into fitness. And you are a very well-connected person. I feel like you know pretty much everybody. You know people at multiple different companies in multiple different countries. So I'd love to hear more about kind of your journey there and how you got such a wide experience with the people in the industry.
Totally. I'm notorious for giving like this long-winded origin story. And so over the years, I've learned to refine it. So my entry into the fitness industry, I can best define it as like a quarter life crisis. And a lot of people make comments are like, quarter life crisis, how old do you expect to be? So basically, what happened was I worked in a warehouse for like 5 years from the point where I was about to like 20 years old to 25. And when I was 25, I had a lot of different life things that came up. I had like a role model of mine. He was a teacher in high school. He ran the basketball program and he unfortunately passed away in a car crash and lost his baby daughter. His wife and his two boys survived, but it was just very impactful on me. I just started to really get in tune to the fact that life is kind of short and like, why would you go to work to do a job that you hate that gives you no sense of purpose? And whenever I say that, I always bring up the fact that like everybody's purpose is different. Some people get a sense of purpose in some industries, some in others. And then basically what happened is I was in a point in my life where I thought I had all the boxes checked. I thought I had like a good salary job. I was okay. I got a girlfriend that'll work out. And then the girlfriend situation ended. And she was a great girlfriend. But because that ended, it really made me take a hard look in the mirror. And I started to get really passionate about just bettering myself. I wanted to remove anything that could be like a character flaw. I wanted to remove all the complaints that I might have had, and that evolved into getting my certifications, doing some like online post secondary, hustling a lot. And then basically, long story short, in January 2018, I basically like bet on myself. I didn't have a trainer job lined up. I thought I might. I thought there was a chance. And so I put in my resignation with the warehouse, and basically, the last day of work, I got notice that I wasn't going to be hired. I then began quite a journey. My first job in fitness was while I was working the full time, while I was doing the certifications. I actually worked for a fitness magazine. And I think that's what gave me like the mindset to just connect with as many people as you can because it's very like sales driven. You can't get a sale unless you talk to people. And so that instilled in me the value of connecting with people, talking to people, getting to know people, just getting out and about and putting yourself out there, learning, experiencing all this other stuff. And then my first trainer job, and before that, I was a spin instructor for about a year. First trainer job was actually an internship. And the internship was essentially set up because I was pretty new in the industry And if I didn't show that like I at least had some desire to learn, they wouldn't have hired me. And I didn't really have like anywhere else to go. Like it was like get the trainer job or go get another like 9 to 5 job. And so it's just that instilled a lot of like just my back was up against a wall. I had to get smarter or I would fail. And then that gym closed 8 months in, and from that point on, my career has been mostly self-employed, and because of that, I've gotten very resourceful. I've had to kinda, like, put my ego to the side and do, like, some odd contract jobs. During the pandemic, I got the privilege to do some contracts with Lululemon, which gave me lots of really good community building experience, lots of connected with lots of amazing people, quite a bit of, like, sales training, customer service training, stuff like that. Got to test out a lot of different cool products and all kinds of things. So that is the concise version of the origin story.
I love the Lululemon. I'm wearing Lululemon shorts right now. They're my favorite workout clothes. I think I got a good amount of Lululemon stuff for Christmas. I think so. I don't know, but I think. But yeah, some of the things that really stood out for me first is your teacher situation. I had a very similar thing personally where I had kind of a near death experience when I was younger, and I think that's why I am very fast to throw things away that I feel like are a waste of time, because for a long time I've had that same exact like life is short. So I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily wish that on people, but it's definitely a super powerful perspective to have. I feel like I'd love to hear more about kind of what got you into fitness specifically, because like you said, different people get passion from different industries. And so what led you to fitness versus some other, way to get like more meaning and more value and more purpose?
Mhm. Well, I mean, there's a good segue there because you talk about a near death experience, and that also kind of ties into some of my work ethic and just like some of the things that I hold important. Because back in the day, back in high school, junior high, I competed in cross country running. And I actually had like this crazy, crazy moment where I realized that like a person could die at any moment. And here's how it kind of went down. It was like an October day, wasn't expecting it to be sweltering hot, but there it was. It was an extremely hot day. We were waiting for our group to start the race. I think it was like a 5 kilometer track. And I was starting to overheat, but I didn't think that it was a problem. Then I got into running. It was like you do a 3K loop and then a 2K loop. I got through the majority of the 3K loop, and I could feel myself slowing down, and I could feel my feet, like, I've never felt like my feet were more on fire than in that moment, and it's just, like, basically what the reason that I kept going is because I had prepared so much for that race, so it felt like it meant more to me to finish because of all the hard work and effort that I put into it, and I wasn't gonna let anybody see me quit. But it really taught me, like, what are the warning signs of, like, severe heat stroke? Because like, my feet were on fire. Like, my whole body started to be tingly. I remember I just gave one final push up to the top of the hill, and then I do not remember anything until I woke up in the hospital bed. So, basically what happened is I got to the top of the hill, lost consciousness, fell down the entirety of the hill. One of the other competitors saw me in a bush. They called over, first they called over one of the race coordinators. He came in a quad. They loaded me up in the quad. They dropped me a few times, got a bit bruised up. And I've heard all these stories from like different gym teachers and coaches and some of the nurses and just word of mouth from different people who were there. And basically what happened, they got me out into this big empty field. They had to like cut all my gear off me. They were throwing buckets of water on me. I was foaming at the mouth. Some people thought that I actually died. Like when I went back to school a few days later, like some of the people were like, "What? You're alive? I thought you died." I was really, it's that easy to accept my death. But like it was wild. And when I woke up in the hospital bed, my whole family was around me, so I got, like, 2 older brothers, I got a sister-in-law, I got my parents, and, like, they got there so fast, and they some of them had to travel, like, what would typically take an hour, and they got there in, like, half an hour, and it just, like, made me realize, like, how precious life is. how your loved ones react, like when something terrible happens, like just how we really need to take each moment and not for granted. And that I'd always really liked the pursuit of physical athleticism. I just didn't know what it looked like for me. I knew that I wasn't good enough at any particular sport to be like, "Oh, I could be a professional athlete." I thought that the only way to help people with fitness was to be a gym teacher. I didn't really think that being a trainer could be a career path. In high school, I actually wanted to go to film school, and it kinda worked out later because I kinda do that now as part of the many things that I do. But it was just, like, what I witnessed when I was training for things like cross country, when I was, like, practicing for soccer, practicing for basketball, practicing for track was just, like, it didn't only make you better physically, but it made you better, like, mentally too. I witnessed how it helped me overcome things, and when I was trying to get over, like, this breakup in my, as I called it, a quarter life crisis, I was also dealing with a lot of life stress. Like, I felt like my whole world was crashing down. There was stuff going on with, like, my property, like my condo that I own, where I thought that it was like the end of the world. And I was just like super anxious, super stressed out. I didn't know what to do. And the thing that helped me with was fitness. And when that really, like, just hit me, when I, like, kind of felt almost invincible because of what I could do with fitness and how it could play into my career, into my mental health, into my physical health, then I was, well, that's the kind of thing that I want to impart on other people. Like, I love this feeling, and I wanna be that person that, like, is somebody else's beacon of hope, and I wanna be that person that helps other people reach their potential. And so that's where it started to get more targeted into fitness. And like I kind of alluded to, I have a little bit of I have my hands in a few different things. Like I'm working in the fitness industry and in the social media industry, in the non-fitness space and the fitness space. So I get to use my creativity. I get to use my passion for physical and professional development. I get to do all these things. It gives me a great sense of purpose. It's a lot of work, a lot of long days, but it feels like I'm doing something that means something in the end. Like it feels like if I died next week, that I would feel far more accomplished than I had ever felt in any other job that I had. And that's sort of like an addictive feeling. Like to be doing things that you love gives you a basically a capacity to work harder than you would work if you were just working for somebody else's passion. Like if I was working for like a bakery and we were making donuts for somebody and that person was really passionate about baking and I was just clocking in, clocking out, I had to pay my electricity bill or something, be a different scenario. But with this, I'm like, no, I have a role in people's lives. I have a role in people's goals. I have a role in so many people's like bigger picture thing. And I'll leave a legacy one day. And that's rewarding. I love that. That's why I like helping people. And even just helping people help other people is really cool in and of itself.
There's a lot that I wrote down there. I love the parallel between kind of our experiences because I also ran cross country. My stuff when I was younger was my appendix had burst and got like ruptured and it was all infected and I almost died there. But I ran cross country and track and played basketball at the time. And getting back to that more endurance kind of like you said, I always even back then, my coach was very big on the mentality, on I mean, the way you think about something can interpret or can change how you feel pain. So my coach was very big on the mental side of things. So I always had that. I'm very interested in obviously we both have brought up the near death experience and but we both talked about kind of endurance training. Like, do you think that endurance background has played a big part even without the near death experience in your work ethic and your kind of locus of what hard actually is.
Absolutely. I mean, like, a lot of people who get to know me start to pick up that I'm a pretty resilient person. A lot of that resilience shows up in my ability to take on failure, but take it as lessons. Like, failure is only a loss if you quit. Like, if something doesn't go your way, and then you just stop trying. Whereas if a person, like, if like we're going into 2024, and if a person can accumulate 24 failures in the year 2024, that doesn't mean that it was a bad year. it means that they're resilient and they probably grew a lot over the course of 12 months. And that happens for me a lot, maybe more than many people may know. And that tends to trend with my progression, like financially, physically, all these other things. And even just segueing sport to sport, like the resilience that I had to have for cross country and for actually like I would do hill sprints. I would load up with like a weighted vest or ankle weights and I just like sprint up the hill as fast as I could. So if we were doing like a competitive run, I would be able to like accelerate up the hill when everybody else is getting tired because I trained that specifically. And now it's like when I'm competing in jujitsu and stuff, you take that same, like, mentality, like, when you're in just, like, a terrible position, but you know that you could probably outlast that other person, they'll get tired, and then you can kind of, like, change the position to be better, like, just that patience to kind of, like, trust the process, I think pays off big time because you can sort of, like you can notice differences in people's style. Some people are like, you can just tell they're using all the energy that they have in the first minute, but you know that you're probably going to have to be doing this for like 5 or 6, sometimes 8 minutes. And so it's just having a comprehension of the patience that it takes to like make it through. And then that's huge for fitness. Like if anybody's like thinking about career in fitness, like is very much like a cross country run because you can be successful and you can do a lot of great things. But you're going to have to like train on very specific things. You're going to just have to get really good at the soft skills with people. You're going to have a better comprehension of like exercise selection, but not just from the textbook, but because you've ran like 100 different people through the same exercise and you've seen how some people respond differently than others. And you've seen how like different personality types, like males versus female, or a person with a good paying job versus a person with a job that barely pays them enough to pay for training. Like their just whole response to things is going to be differently. The way that they take their time seriously or not seriously is going to be different. The excuses or just like the way that they logic things out is going to be different. Like some people are like, I am so busy. And then if you look at like how they're dedicating their time, it's like, well, I mean, like you could be busier. And other people are like, oh, I got time. And then you're looking at their calendar. Like I worked with somebody who runs like 8 different dental clinics. And she's like, I got time. And I'm like looking at her calendar. I'm like, do you sleep? And, like, it looks like she probably maybe gets, like, 4 hours of sleep a night, and that's just, like, the nature of what she does, but she was passionate about taking care of her fitness because it helped clear her mental health, and that's just where the priorities lied for her. So, all of that to say that if you can get good at just kind of, like, embracing the suck and just, like, staying the course, and maybe one time it doesn't go your way, maybe, like, 8 times doesn't go your way, but you're still doing the thing, like, you're still competing, you're still showing up, still practicing. That is a skill set that is rare, but extremely valuable when it comes to this stuff. Like I've seen so many talented people take a step back from the fitness industry and like they're people that I've learned from or they're people that I've like admired something that they did. And all they had to do was like sometimes it's just a matter of a good conversation with a colleague. Sometimes it's a matter of like having a good mentor. Sometimes it's a matter of just like taking a breather for a month and then getting right back to it. But anybody's susceptible to quitting, but quitting often like, there's times to quit and there's times not to quit. For a really good trainer or coach, if they don't quit, it's best because the people like, we need good trainers and coaches. We need people with that skill set that sets them apart.
Yeah, I really a term I heard a long time ago was like fail fast, and you mentioned failure being a lesson and racking up failures in 2024, and the ability to reframe failures as ways to learn. So fail fast and adapt, fail fast and adapt, and instead of getting down, learning from it. I think that's super powerful, and that's something I'm gonna think about a lot going into the next year. Is like, hey, how much can I learn? And start racking up. Hey, I'm gonna keep tallying these failures as a hey, this was a learning point. This was a learning point. So I think that's super powerful. I also think the patience to trust the process, like you said, super powerful and super obvious in endurance sports. I think also important in strength sports, just less obvious because it's, not as binary, whereas an endurance sport, you're doing the entire race. But I think it's super important, like you mentioned, in fitness because, in a race or a strength event or pretty much anything, the middle of the road feels awful. And you're like, you don't feel strong, you don't feel fast, you don't feel, insert whatever. But then as you taper into the event, you start to realize all that fitness that you've put in the work for. And that's also true of, like you said, business and of just everything else. You have a lot of work to do and it doesn't pay off. And then all of a sudden it starts to compound and pay off. You look at anybody that's big in any industry or anything and look back 5 or 10 years, and they've been doing things a lot longer than you thought. The overnight success was never an overnight success. So I just wanted to mention that again because that's like super powerful, super important. And I have so many people that talk to me and feel down because they see other people that are way ahead of them and they don't realize that that person worked for 10 years before they ever posted one thing online, or their stuff, they deleted everything after 5 years because they were embarrassed because it was doing horrible. They don't realize the effort that went into it, whether it's fitness or not fitness. So I just think that's a great reminder going into 2024 for everybody because social media likes to crap on New Year's resolutions, but I had a behavior change PhD on my podcast a few episodes ago, and she was talking about how powerful they actually are. So I, that was something that changed my mind because I was very much of the like, start whenever. But talking to her, I was like, oh, that's super interesting. It makes a lot of sense. So yes, going into 2024, that was super inspirational. I just wanted to mention that. Going back a little bit, you mentioned earlier making people mentally better and having an impact and kind of dying whenever and being okay with it. And that sounds morbid. That's something I think about a lot. So I was very happy to hear you say it because I think about it a lot. Like if I died right now, would I be happy with the way I'm living my life, with the way I'm impacting people? And, even impacting one person, through coaching is so much more meaningful than, you know, working a day job and, working for somebody else, like you mentioned. But the impact that you can have on people, even just this little conversation, right? If one person listens to this and hears it and it changed their perspective, like we become very unconsciously competent at things and it's easy to take it for granted, but it can really help people. So I just love your perspective on that. One of the things I wanted to ask you about more about is connecting with people. You mentioned earlier on that you realized that you needed to have those soft skills, needed to connect with people, needed to talk to people. I think that's become even more important post COVID. And you kind of mentioned COVID in there as well. So I would love to hear that because people might be sitting here and thinking like, oh, it's great for him. He's super easy to talk to. Like, look at him. He talks really easy. He knows he definitely doesn't have social anxiety like I do. So of course he can talk to people. So could you maybe speak to that relationship building piece of everything?
Oh, for sure. And it's funny, like the little things that you kind of like set me up to give you like side notes and stuff. But basically, w- I started off very nervous to try new things. So the first group fitness stuff that I did was actually spin classes. I actually spent a year as a spin instructor after spending I went to like 100 spin classes in a row, like 100 days of spin classes. And this was kind of my way of like coping with heartbreak and stress and all this other stuff. And it's just like the music and everything that came with it kind of like got in my head. I was like, man, that's so motivational. That Coldplay is really getting to me. And that kind of was like the bug that started things off. But the very first time I went into the building that I started going to classes at, I was with my ex and some of her friends, and each of them, I'm pretty sure they had me by the arm, dragging me like through the door because I didn't want to go because I was like, this is new. I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to be here. But I was there out of solidarity and everything was fine, but I just felt so out of place. Like I would get so nervous to do anything that was like off the beaten path. So I have definitely felt anxious about meeting new people, about talking to new people, all this stuff. And I think that if you do your research and you look across some of the more charismatic people in the industry or people who are like super chatty, they probably have similar origins. A lot of the people that I look up to have a lot of like sort of like social anxiety. They're kind of introverted and stuff. But despite that, they found a way around it. Like whether they spend a lot of time talking on the training floor or whether they found a way to really like convey the confidence that they really know what they're doing because they had to learn it the hard way. But what I would say is the driving force behind me getting better at that particular skill and behind like connecting with people Started off because of that kind of like desperation to change careers. So the sales job with the magazine was commission based. It had the potential to become like a full time thing. But when it's commission based, it's like you're not going to get paid unless you're selling stuff. And to sell enough stuff to pay all your bills, you're going to have to sell a lot of stuff. So I'd maybe sell enough that it would be like 2 to 300 a month on a really good month, and other than that, it was like I'd get to go to things for free, I'd get to network and talk to people, but it was just like I wanted to make this change, and I felt the only obstacle in the way was me. It was like I had to talk to more people. That quickly segued when I was doing the spin instructing, I had to fill classes. Like, if I didn't fill classes, I would not be a viable instructor. It's a business. You have to put butts in seats. And so then I was like trying to grow my Instagram account and I was like connecting with people. And it's very like I still have a very, like, wholesome lens on Instagram, like, I'm not generally, like, transactionally connecting with people, I'm like, "Oh, man, like, that person I like what that person's up to," and I connect with them, or somebody follows me, I'm like, "Who's this?" And I follow them back unless they're, like, super weird, and it's just, like, continuing to, like, stack on these things, and that just kind of, like that's how I started to meet some of my first mentors, the people who were, like, doing what I wanted to do, where I could learn from them. From there, I listened to I have a few friends in the industry, Andrew Coates and Dean Guido. They started a podcast. It used to be called The Fitness Devil You Know, and then it turned into Lift Free and Diet Hard, which is now exclusively by Andrew Coates. And so they've known me since the beginning of my career. I've listened to everything that they've ever put on the internet ever. Like even the stuff from before they knew me, unless there was something in a dark, deep hole that I couldn't find. I I'm very passionate about everybody who's ever helped me. I try to dig into the stuff that they've done. I try to support it. I try to show that support in public, sharing their podcasts, stuff like that. Those connections have gone leaps and bounds. Like people like Kyle Dobbs, Matt Domney, they've helped me quite a bit, not only with just like my understanding of like programming for people and onboarding people and little things like that, but also just like my sense of like identity as a coach and my confidence. There's been little things that have come up that like have uh, been life changing for me that a lot of people wouldn't realize. So I'm constantly, infinitely grateful for those people that have helped me, and then it's just like it just spiders out. You meet somebody like I worked at a bar. When I was working at the bar, I got clients while I was at the bar. I also made connections that led to further opportunities, corporate opportunities, things like that because of the work that I did at the bar when I was first starting to get more clients with the gym. It's all stemmed from having this feeling that if I didn't do it, nobody was gonna save me. Like, if I don't connect with these people to learn more, I'm going to stay stagnant and not get smarter. If I don't figure out how somebody else did the thing, how will I ever do it? Like, the thing that gave me courage to even consider going into the fitness industry was I have a colleague, his name is Jordan Jeske, he's based in Edmonton. He had left his career as a carpenter and gone into training. And so I followed him on Instagram and I connected with him and I asked if he could like share more about like the process, how he did it. And he set some time aside. We talked on the phone for about 2 hours and he told me that it's a big risk. Like it takes a lot of work, but if I was really serious about it, then go for it. And I ended up taking a bigger risk because like, he had a bit of savings. He had an ability to be in a bit more of a stable position and I hadn't really, like, stacked that up yet, and I was like, let's just do this." And, like, there's no option to just have it not work. We're just gonna work until it works. And that is basically what happened. So it's like everything that I've achieved that's meaningful to me is connected to somebody. And so that's why connection matters so much. And like end of every day, I'm thinking about like the people that I've listed. And then so I'm thinking about the first client I've ever had. I'm thinking about people who supported me during the pandemic. And even I think I strayed away from your initial question. So I'm going to reroute myself back to it. So when the pandemic hit, that's when things like continuing education online were so helpful for me. I've had help from people like Lucy Hendricks. I've had help from just colleagues who would just hop on a call with me. I spent time where I would just talk to people who were on the same journey as me, and we would just talk shop on Zoom. There's some times when I've been able to help other people with like their marketing just because of my ability. Like I've got a background doing web design, I've done endless video editing. There's a lot of things that I've done outside of the industry that have helped me in the industry where I can give other people in the industry a leg up. And so we talk about that. We talk about what are we doing to get clients. We talk about all these things. So I was doing that like before I was doing that almost like formally. And it was just because it was like a rising tide lifts all ships, that whole mentality. Like there's room for everybody to be successful. There is no cap on the amount of gratitude that you can show for the people that helped you out. And there's going to be endless opportunities to help other people. Like somebody helps you up the mountain, reach out your hand, help somebody else up the mountain. Even if it's just like making time for somebody who's going through like in this industry, people will go through like struggles where it's like something happened in their personal life and they just need a friend. So like having these connections so that you are somebody's friend or having these connections so that if somebody's going through like something like that's transformative in their life that's like causing them to really like question themselves that they have somebody that they can trust that they can just be real with. Those things carry a lot of weight for me in my life, like how I make my decisions. I like that people are comfortable being themselves with me, that people trust me, and that I just get to be in a room where people are willing to pour into me with energy because I know like I'm rarely like the most talented person in a room, but that's strategic. I'm not putting myself in rooms where I'm like the best. It's most often I'm like probably one of the newest or one of the most beginner in contrast with the other people in there. And it's not because I see myself as incompetent, it's more so as I see myself as very I just wanna keep getting better, and I never wanna stop getting better, and I want to figure it out in the most, like, sustainable way in that when, like, challenges happen, like gym closures, I can figure it out. When challenges happen, like isolation, I can figure it out, and I can connect with people because 'cause I've built this foundation of people that I see eye to eye with. So hopefully that kind of answers your question.
It does, yeah. Yeah, I think it's super powerful too to have that confidence to figure it out when like that belief in yourself. We've talked about this before, you and I, about belief in yourself and the ability to figure it out. I wanted to swing back a little bit on what you said about Instagram and how I think you said positive approach. You use a different word, but kind of a positive approach about helping people and connecting with people. I think it's super powerful. A lot of people have a very negative view of social media, rightfully so. Sometimes it can be a place that's not very great, but also if you use it, kind of that as that tool to connect. Like I've connected with so many people that have brought me so much value, and I have been able to provide others value because of that. That's something that people, you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier in passing. If you help somebody, that person can then maybe take what they've learned and help people. And people, I think, underestimate that. I try to tell people whenever something they've told me has helped somebody else. That way they kind of know, hey, you worded this to me in this way. And that really rewired how I think. And now I can help my clients, in a different way because now I have that ability. And I want to give you the credit. I want to let you know that that helped me. But so many times that happens and you don't ever hear a peep because people might not even realize that it was you that helped them help other people that way. And really, my approach to kind of the whole Instagram and just the business in general is, I might help this person. And, one person might not feel like a huge impact because people are used to seeing, 100 million followers and all this stuff. But if that one person then helps two people with that, and one of those people then helps somebody else, you kind of have this legacy you mentioned earlier, this chain reaction. In the way I've kind of lived my life is the most impact I can have is on my family and on those immediate people around me. And by having that impact, that then branches out because in 3 or 4 generations, nobody's ever going to remember who I am. But the impact that I have on this person has an impact on another person and has this chain reaction of positivity, if you will.
Totally. Well, I mean, I think I missed like the main question. We were talking about, are we talking about positivity on social media or just kind of help me reframe it to keep me on track?
wasn't necessarily a question. It was just kind of a statement, and I kind of just stopped and saw if you wanted to see if you had anything to say. But
I totally do. I totally do. I can roll with that. So something that you highlighted was talking about how we can use social media within the work that we do. And there's a lot of people that can use it to kind of like get attention, but it's kind of like attention that doesn't really like help them as an entity. Like it might help them gain a following, but it might not help them get people who want to work with them or want to talk to them. And everything is going to be like person specific because like different people are going to attract within their world different people. The way that I see it is I run a lot of different social media accounts, so I am exposed to it enough that with my own account, if I'm not doing something that I'm like proud of or that I can stand by or that like I could show to my parents, be like, look what I did, then I shouldn't be doing it. Like I should get off the platform. And like sometimes I've been in situations where it's like gone too far down one direction or whatever, and I'm just like not at my best. And it's like not my best work. Like maybe I'll put some dumb piece of content or I'll like poke fun at something. And I realized that like to get the most out of social media, you have to be at your best off social media. So a lot of people desperately need to connect with people offline. Like, a lot of people are hurt people that are hurting other people, like all your private account keyboard cowboys, they're struggling. Like, if you were to do a deep dive and like look into what their life is going on, like most of the time, like the people who throw shade my way on social media, they either aren't in the industry, have left the industry, unemployed. Like, I'll look them up. I look into their stuff because it agitates me when people try to pick fights with me on the internet. And I've never been made fun of by somebody who's in a better position than me, and the more aware I've become of that, the more, like, empathetic I get. Like, I'm like, "I don't wish that upon them." Like, if they wanted help, I would rather help them than get in some stupid argument over, like, what shirt I wore or, like, what my facial hair looks like or something dumb. Like, people come into the woodwork for the dumbest things on social media. Or they argue about things that don't matter, like arguing about like which exercise or what angle should we do this like cable tricep extension. It's like we live in North America where majority of the people are sedentary and desperately need physical fitness. Like there's recently a study that got released where like in Canada, people who don't strength train are costing Canada like billions of dollars per year based on like the outcomes of like being detrained, deconditioned, not having the benefits of physical activity. So it's like we really got to pick our battles. Like we're in a world where somebody can go to ChatGPT and ask for basically their macros and ask for a good strength training program. And they could do this with like the free version and it could set them up. And we still have a population that struggles. So the last thing we need is people making it seem even more awkward to get into physical activity. And the last thing that we need is something that's like an extra in our life, like our phones are an accessory to the human experience. They aren't the experience. Like when something is awesome and you like it on your phone, it's much more gratifying to like something in real life, like to be I've done backpacking trips, I've traveled, I've done lots of cool things. I've gotten to meet people that I really admired and looked up to and heard what they had to say and learn lessons from them and these like feelings that you get from experiencing that in person goes leaps and bounds beyond any kind of like a huge following. Like, fortunately, most people that get some kind of a following on the internet tend to have a correlation with their human experiences as well. Fingers crossed. Sometimes they end up just like they're very isolated people. They're very good with their marketing. They're good with this, but it's just having a positive, forward thinking abundance mindset with social media and being able to kind of like set your boundaries with what kind of energy you want, what energy you don't like in order for me to not really compare myself with other people, I just know that a lot of people have been through some stuff. And so if I'm ever like, I want what they have, then I really think about it. I'm like, they got their struggles. Like you work in a bar, you get to see like when people have bad days because they're out at the bar and they're having their bad day in front of you and you're being respectful of it all, but it's just like it shows you just how human the world is and how we're all kind of like a work in progress. So I have no desire to like compare myself to somebody that's further along. Sometimes it'll kind of like give me some motivation. Like, what am I doing? Like, how can I be better? But then I'm able to kind of see like the road ahead of me is long and I've got a lot of like reps to put in to kind of get to that place. Um, and I think to sort of summarize this to make it a bit more concise, when you compare yourself to somebody else and when you are negative about anything going on in your life, the only thing that you're costing is yourself. Because we get like, unless we get evolved in technology where they make us immortal, there is an endpoint to all of this. So if I spend 2 hours today scrolling through Instagram, worried about what somebody else is doing, that's 2 hours that I could have spent like watching my nieces play ringette or going for a walk or like just really enjoying life, having the best workout ever. Like that's time that I will never get back. And the more in tune with that we get, it's a lot easier the busier you are because it's like black and white. It's like I'm choosing this or I'm choosing this. The easier it is to set boundaries, you start to mute accounts, you start to just like distance yourself from people who are just yelling and screaming on the internet or people who are just like there's holding people accountable and that has its merit, but then there's also just like kind of poking the bear for no reason, like poking a bear across the other side of the world just because you know you can poke them. Like there's no rhyme or reason to that. And for anybody listening, I'm not referencing anything specifically. It's just basically like if you're gonna do something, leave some good in the world. Like make somebody's day better, even if it sounds fluffy and soft. Like in order for you to make somebody's life better, you have to make yourself better, and that takes a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. So get in the arena, get your hands dirty, and then impart on what you've learned on someone else so that they can then follow suit and put in the reps themselves and experience the benefits of patience, resilience, and hard work.
Poking a bear is a such a Canadian analogy. I just wanted to point that out. But yeah, totally. I talk to a lot of people and they're very self-conscious because of, going to the gym or going out to run. And I love that you brought up that people in front of you will never tear you down. It's always people behind you or people that are hurting in some other way. Like, the people in front of you have been where you're at before at some point, whether it was a year ago or 10 years ago. And so 99% of those people are going to cheer you on because they know that other people cheered them on or they wish people cheered them on when they were there. And, the only people tearing you down are the people that aren't where you want to be or they're hurting in some other way and, need a little bit of love anyways. So again, I think that's super powerful. I have that conversation with a lot of people. And then also the interesting thing, like you mentioned, a lot of North America is sedentary. I deal with a lot of endurance athletes, self-berate because they have very high training schedules already, but they see other people and people, on the other end of the spectrum have the same issue. They're self-berating because they're like, oh, I know I should do something. And everybody's like, I should be more disciplined. I should be more disciplined. And at some point, yes, maybe. But you mentioned how people online, you don't see the rest of their life. And this is where that came from. You've got a lot of people that preach discipline and they're, insanely productive at their thing online. But when you look into it, they, have like failed marriages and like the rest of their life is basically falling apart, except for their fitness account where they preach discipline and getting up at 2 a.m. And so I have that conversation with a lot of people about having grace. You want to still be a parent, you still want to be able to show up. Like you're not, this guy that whose rest of his life is kind of in shambles. So I just wanted to bring that up. Like you brought up how important it is to connect offline. And you do see a lot of people online that have large accounts who do seem to like sometimes I ask myself, like, how do they have the time to have such a big account and post all this stuff? Because they do so much outside that they're posting on their stories and stuff. So it just kind of goes to show that they have their stuff outside of social media too. One thing I wanted to circle back on, I had this note from earlier, like a way earlier, and then you mentioned again, ChatGPT, AI programs, right? We're kind of in an age of information where it's so easy to get things like training programs. And I've had this conversation with clients about how, a client will apologize because we're messaging back and forth like a new client, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like I'm asking so many questions," and I'll tell them, "No, like in 5 or 10 years, like the programming side is you could completely have AI do it." Like the important thing for coaching is the people and the art and like this part of it, like figuring out why you're having this problem from a like emotional pain perspective, not from just be more disciplined and like do the training. You mentioned earlier people's mental, well, I'm going to word mental load. You mentioned somebody says they're very busy and you look at their calendar and they're not very busy, whereas somebody else might be super busy and they say, oh yeah, I've got time, and they're not really sleeping. I would love to hear you maybe talk about that, like mental load versus effort, like the actual output versus how you feel you're outputting, because this is something that comes up for a ton of different people at a ton of different places in their fitness journey or their business journey or wherever they're at, where there comes a point when you feel like you're doing a lot and you're really not. And then, 2 or 3 years later, you realize, wow, like I feel less stressed now doing a lot more than I did then. So I hope that makes sense. Is that a clear question, or do you want
Yep.
more clarity there?
No, that's good. So I think that's gonna be like it's kind of like we go through life and we're like, okay, when I get to this, I'm gonna be smart enough that I'm never gonna have to come across this situation again. And it stems back to the whole like having like a network of people, like having people that you can kind of work with and talk to. Because sometimes you need somebody to just like give you the tough love, to be like, look, like I know that you think that you're doing this thing and you think it's awesome, but it's really not that awesome. And that takes a lot of like, you have to be extremely self aware to be able to take certain like levels of feedback. Like sometimes, and especially probably before I turned 30, like I'm 31 now, I'll be 32 in like a couple months. And as I approached my 30s, like my level of self awareness, like understanding that like there is so much more to learn became more heightened. Yeah, I figured that I was like way further ahead in my mid 20s than where I was in reality. And so, with that said, one of the biggest opportunities for a person who is like trying to navigate that whole like, how do I get more done with the same amount of time? Or how do I get more time back? A lot of what helps is having like other people in your corner. They could even be having like a counselor, like a mental health counselor, a therapist. I have done counseling sessions, and what that did for me is it kind of like unloaded some of the stuff that I was dealing with that kind of made me feel busier. But I was just thinking about stuff that didn't matter. And that can kind of clear up your schedule, as it were. The other thing that I think is pretty important, like if you don't have people that you work closely with that you can have like ongoing meetings with, like to have like a coach, whether it's for your performance or for your business, I think that's kind of like something that never expires. Like you should probably always have somebody to some degree. I have mentors in the fitness industry, but I also have mentors outside of the fitness industry that can kind of give me like reality checks and feedback and a little bit of compassion, hold some space, answer questions faster, things like that, free up your time. And it's just like it's kind of like when you're cooking or baking. Like you think you got the recipe down pat, you put it in the oven, you put it on the stove, and you're like, yeah, this is gonna be great, but it needs more salt. Well, then you perfect that the next go around. And so the same thing goes for life. You're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna crush it this year. We're gonna hit this like revenue mark, or we're going to hit this lift, and it's gonna be great. Oh, got sick. Oh, kid got sick. Oh no, there's some stress. Oh, elderly family members need some support. Like these things come up, and we get blindsided, and we're like, oh no, it didn't go the way that I thought it would. But then you have people that you can lean on, people that you can like sometimes it's people that you can be like, "Hey, a little overwhelmed. Can I refer this client to you?" You refer the client to them. That person gets served. It's a good situation. Like there's been times when maybe I could have used the revenue from another client, but that client would have had a better experience if I referred it to somebody else. So I referred them to somebody else. That client got taken care of. I still had a good relationship with that client. They eventually came back to me because they wanted something that I specialized in years later. So it kind of stems back to like you can't do things by yourself, even if like on paper you're by yourself. you're always going to need to have people and you're going to need to get comfortable just being honest with them and with yourself. It's important to realize when you need some kind of an intervention, like whether it be like a new environment to place yourself in where you're not as stressed or where you're challenged in better ways. Like for me to place myself in jujitsu, I'm challenged in better ways because I'm not thinking about anything with regards to anything that's not jujitsu. And when I'm done jujitsu, the only things I think about are the things that actually matter. And I'm not thinking about like what somebody posted on Instagram. I'm not thinking about what color somebody's car is or whether it's raining or snowing. I'm just like, okay, got work to do, or I gotta go visit some family, or got some plans with friends. Sense of urgency is heightened. So sort of like a long ramble of a response, but maybe you had some nuggets out of there that you want to rally on.
Yeah, I mean, asking for help or seeking out coaches or help is something that I'm very passionate about. I have a lot of different coaches and mentors that I have sought out over the years. I don't know if it's something that came kind of naturally just from playing sports because I started playing basketball when I was 6 years old. So I don't know if it was just like, hey, I don't know this. I'm going to go ask somebody who's a professional in this space. But even from a long, like years ago before I even was cognizant of it, I unconsciously like sought out mentors or help, whether it was I've gotten a ton of actual really useful, like real life advice and things that made a real impact on my life from like forums, which, 10 years ago people would be like, forums. But like Reddit has actually connected me with so many people in person. We actually have a shared acquaintance that he's a coach, and I've been talking to him on Reddit since like 2015, I think. Like at the time I had no idea that we'd talk this long and then we'd actually like, you know, build this like professional relationship. So it's kind of cool what can come out of that. But I was just gonna like add that I went to see a life coach for a little bit when I was trying to figure out like what I was gonna do when I got out of the Navy, and that's what kind of got me through to starting my business, my coaching business. It's one of those like you can't read the label inside the box. I use that term a lot. It's something that I really like, just having an outside perspective, whether it's a fitness coach, a friend, a business coach, a life coach, fill in the blank there. I think that it's so easy to get lost in your own thoughts in your own head, and having somebody to just take a step back and provide some very simple clarity. And then you're like, oh, like, duh, like, why didn't I see that? But, again, it's hard to read the label from inside the box. So I just think that was a super powerful takeaway from that portion of the conversation. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, like, the more that you talked about the different connections and like the different benefits that a person can have, the more I got thinking about how important it is to have like a goal. Like some people, you're like, oh, like I ask a lot of people, do you set like a 5 year goal? Do you set like a 1 year goal? And a lot of people are like, no, I don't do that. And like, I do believe that if I went and like talked to them further, then they'd be able to kind of break down what their plan is for their future. But to kind of like emphasize the point that I'm trying to reinforce is that like for myself, I have like a very clear idea of like the direction that I want to be by the time I'm like 40. I've like generated renderings of what it looks like. I have spreadsheets. I've calculated costs. Like it's very literal. And for myself, I am also like adaptable in that like people come into your life or things change or like the economy shifts and industries change. So like that can change. But when I have like a very quantifiable goal, that's what kind of like gives me the sense of urgency that I need, that if something is slipping, that I'm going to find the help that I need. So to contextualize it for maybe some clients and stuff that might be listening to this show, uh, I compete in jujitsu. And for me to be competitive at jujitsu, I need to progress. For me to progress faster than I would by going to typical classes, I have to invest in private lessons. In order to absorb the private lessons the best, I actually have to have better recovery than the average person. I have to sleep better. And so that requires me to kind of like set boundaries around my time, schedule accordingly. I've cut out alcohol for the entirety of 2023. Part of that was just for professional goals, some of it personal goals, just kind of like you can be on your A game way more when you're doing that. You can have clear, concise conversations with people way more of the time, and you can get to jujitsu more often and show up better and retain the information better. But if I didn't have like in the context of jujitsu, if I wasn't competing, it wouldn't matter. You just show up, you put in your time, you go home. Maybe they give you a stripe after a while, but you just wouldn't care about stuff. And so then to bring it back to like if there's coaches and stuff listening, like if you don't have like an idea of what you want to achieve by the end of like 2024, like that's kind of it's risky. Like you probably pull it off, but like and then what? Like are you going to do the exact same thing that you did the year prior with like inflation? Are you going to do the same thing that you did prior with increasing like family costs? Are you setting yourself up for retirement? Have you thought about what happens when you turn like 60, 70 years old and you can't do like training sessions on the training floor? Have you thought about what happens when you like get burnt out and you need to take off 4 weeks and need to be paid for those 4 weeks? Like all these things, like building out your business, kind of creating enough revenue that you can like pay yourself from that revenue. All these things take into play, but they almost don't exist if somebody's not in tune like with the needs of their lifestyle. Like some people, they almost treat training and coaching like a part-time job, and it rewards them as such, and they get frustrated. Just because our career is fun doesn't mean it's less work. And the thing that makes it great is that we enjoy it, we're passionate about it. So the work, we can tolerate greater amounts of work. But that is the long story short, that people need to set goals to help them on their path to kind of get clear on things.
Yeah, that's something I'm going to do in the next few weeks is really get very clear. I have some ideas and have some things written out, but get a clear document on 2024 goals and then backtrack to like 6 month, 90-day, whatever. I haven't gotten figured out how granular I want to get with it yet, but I'm a nerd and it sounds like you've got a lot of spreadsheets. So it sounds like you get it. I love spreadsheets, but coming in this podcast is going to come out and 2023 is winding down. Coming into 2024, a lot of people are going to be thinking about exactly what you said. Like, what do I want to do? Maybe they aren't. Maybe they're just kind of going with the flow. And now they're like, oh, maybe I should think about things. If you are hesitant about New Year's resolutions because you think they're stupid, I would recommend you go back a few episodes and listen to that one about, how things like that are powerful. But for people that are coming in 2024, you kind of, in my brain, have two different ends of the spectrum. You have people who have really big goals and they're hesitant to put them on paper because they're like, I don't know if I can achieve this. This is quite a stretch. And then you have people who are like, I have no idea what goals I would have. I've never set goals for myself, or I've set goals and failed at every single goal. So, like, why set another goal? So, kind of be mindful of time and the fact that this podcast is coming out kind of end of 2023. I would love to kind of hear your message to those people coming in 2024, like how to set goals effectively and, kind of build that self confidence. That's something that we seem to talk about a lot, is that self confidence and belief in yourself. So, I'd love to hear kind of your take on all that.
So, first and foremost, anybody that's made it this far in the episode, I encourage you to go on to Apple Podcasts, give the podcast a 5-star rating, and leave a review, because like that's gonna help Justin leaps and bounds. It helps every podcast host, but like if you've made it this far, you're obviously a dedicated listener. So now we're going to talk about the goals that you're going to set for next year. Um, I have a background where I've attended a lot of like visions and goals workshops with Lululemon. Those are really helpful because it kind of helps you get kind of in tune with like what your life looks like, what things are like. What I would say is just because your goal is kind of out of reach, like it's a big goal, that's almost the best goal to have, because it's going to force you to work harder than you would have had it been like an achievable goal. You just like you'll mail it in if your goal is achievable. So you almost want your goal to be out of reach. And you want to have like a deadline for your goal. Like you're gonna do this, but when? Like when are you gonna do this? Because you can't just keep like extending the deadline over and over and over. You can get to your deadline and not be 100% successful. You can get 70% success. That's fine. Dust yourself off, learn what you learn, and try again. Set a new goal. But you, basically, like the term that we would use whenever I went to a Lululemon event was your big, hairy, audacious goal. My first big, hairy, audacious goal was to resign from the one job to go full time into fitness. And it was kind of like full time, but it wasn't really like enough income full time. But I did the thing. And then as time has gone on, the goals have changed, and I've like usually like I'll reach for it and I'll just miss slightly, but from the outsider perspective, they think I'm just crushing it. And so like it doesn't matter if you get your goal 100% or not because nobody knows the difference. But to have set something that actually means something to you that gets you out of bed in the morning, that's going to motivate you on the days when you're like, oh my God, I got 3 hours of sleep. I can't do this. Or it's like, oh, I'm just not feeling good today. That's what gets you to do your workout. So you're feeling good today. That is your why. That is like your North Star. That's what drives you. That's what keeps you getting after it. That's what makes you prioritize spending something on one thing versus the other thing. That is sort of the calling that people need to keep going. So I guess what I would say for people is A, set goals, but B, set big, hairy, audacious goals and put a deadline, put something in the calendar. Another thing that you can do, I can't remember the website for this, but if you Google it, you'll probably find it. It's basically a platform where you can write a letter to yourself. I've done this with a few Lululemon trainings. I found it to be like it's kind of like fluffy. It's a little bit like woo woo, but it has benefited me. So if anybody thinks I'm cool, go do the thing. Basically, what you do is you go to this platform, and I think it might be like lettertoyourself.com or something like that, and you type out a letter of like, you could do it in so many different ways. But the way I'm going to position you to do it is you are telling yourself where you are at in life then. And you're making a statement. You're saying it with your chest. You're like, I'm going to have like 20 clients, 20 more than I have now, or I'm going to buy a boat, or I'm going to work from Mexico for a month, or I'm going to register and complete that race and I'm going to get like a certain time, like something that's very like finite. It's like there's no questioning if you got it or not. And then you go through your life and you're kind of subliminally thinking about that letter. Basically, the way the platform works is you schedule that letter to email it to you at that date. Then, when it comes to that date, you have sort of like a milestone that shows you how far you've come. And if you didn't quite get it, you're going to be so much more proud of yourself, which is going to instill so much more confidence. Like half the time, if somebody's like struggling in the industry, just like getting on a call with them, asking where they're at like in January and learning about what they've done now, and then saying that back to them, the amount of confidence they get from that, like that's what I got from counseling. I told the guy my whole fitness career, every little like behind the scene thing that I don't talk about on podcasts that happened to me that I dealt with and how I like faced that. And then he said it back and he was like, holy shit. And I was like, I know. And it was transformative. It gave me this whole new level of confidence. And so like you got to get reflective and sometimes you got to bet on yourself, not just in the sense that you think that you're going to succeed every single time, but knowing that if you are not like giving it your full effort, like foot on the gas pedal, not letting off, pushing as hard as you can, if you're not doing that, how would you expect to accomplish these big things? Knowing what other people have to do to accomplish the goals that they're after, like you go and you listen to some podcasts from some of the industry greats and they started off in janitor closets or they worked for free. They trained people for free for like a year before somebody got them a job. Like everybody's got like this story. And the reason that they kept going is I'm sure they had some kind of a big, hairy, audacious goal in their mind. And I'm quite certain that things didn't quite go the way that they thought they would go, but they went somewhere because here they are now and we're all looking up to them. So little things like that, I think it'll be helpful. Hopefully it can be contextualized for both like the fitness enthusiast, the performance athlete, the trainer, the coach, and our parents if they tune in. Everybody and anybody that listens will hopefully have something that they can relate to after they give you their 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
Appreciate the plug there for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad listens to this and he is a cyclist, so at least he will get value from it. I know he listens to the whole thing.
That's
But
amazing.
no, that's super powerful. I'm fired up over here. I want to walk through my wall, you know?
Perfect.
Every
Like
time
the
we talk,
Kool-Aid man.
yep. Oh no, I really appreciate that. Appreciate you coming on. You have any other parting words you want to say? You kind of mic dropped there, but
I think the last things that I have to say is if people haven't connected with me before and if you want to, you can find me on Instagram at Christian Liddle. That's basically like how you find anything else about me. But other than that, just like keep supporting Justin. He's going to do some pretty cool stuff. So if you haven't listened to the other episodes, go binge listen to some episodes. And like it's going to be really cool as his podcast continues. Because if there's anything like watching the legacy of a podcast evolve and watching the host change and seeing the conversations that get encapsulated, that's career changing, it's life changing. And so I'm just glad that anybody listening is along for this journey because I can say from experience that it's a big deal and it's exciting. And I was very privileged to get this opportunity today.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll throw your Instagram in the show notes, and then I'm going to dig up that website to write yourself a letter because I'm going to do it. I'll put it in the show notes so people can do it. So I think that'd be super cool. If I got a letter today from myself a year ago, I don't know. I'm super interested to see what that would have said. So definitely can do that. I'll put that in the show notes. Put your Instagram in the show notes. And do you have anything else you wanted to throw down there as links or anything?
That's everything. Basically, if they get to the links in my Instagram, that'll take them anywhere I need them to go. And other than that, they can see my unique, witty takes on things and what I'm up to and connect.
Yeah. If you want to know how to lift outside with logs, Chris has you. I love those posts.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. It was good talking to you. And I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed it, it would be helpful if you could leave a rating or review on whatever platform you're listening on, as that helps us reach more audiences and get more awesome guests on. If you're interested in anything we talked about today, you can check the show notes for all links. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next podcast.